Welcome to 21st Century Learning, exploring the intersection of education and technology. This is episode number 3.02, and you're listening to the EdTech Talk channel of the World Bridges Network. Today is October 23rd, 2014. I'm Alex Ragone.
And I'm Arvind Grover.
And we are Vinny-less this week.
Yeah, and then there were two.
Then there were two. But Arvind and I just had this really interesting started to have this conversation about communications and good communications with parents and kind of engaging people in conversation. And we were talking about some people we know who are really fantastically engaging speakers. And then Arvind told me about an author that he's been kind of following or listening to some podcasts about. And do you want to introduce that, Arvind?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Olivia Fox Cabane, I think that's how you say her last name, is the author I'm talking about, and she wrote a book called The Charisma Myth. And I saw her do an interview with Ramit Sethi where she was kind of just explaining what charisma is. And, you know, she talked about being a young kid and not being charismatic at all and being kind of outcast, and then just really wanting to figure out, like, how do people, you know, how are they responded to differently? Why are they responded to differently? So she took the highly scientific approach to it and started reading and researching and testing all kinds of hypotheses. And so she's come out with basically three things for charisma. It's power, presence, and warmth. And those are the three pieces anybody needs to be charismatic. Now, some people who have a lot of charisma have that, they've figured that out. They weren't born with it per se, but they figured it out. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the one person they always talk about is Bill Clinton. People say that Bill Clinton is like the most charismatic person. Yep. And the way they describe that is they say he makes you feel like there's no one else in the room.
Right.
Right? So he is a master of presence.
Yeah.
When you're speaking to him, his 100% of his attention is in your eyes, in your face, and is approachable in a way that's, you know, a lot of people can't do that.
Right.
And so she just gives a couple of tips in the book or in her interview, rather. I'm looking at the book now. How you can practice those skills. If those are skills, or, you know, even just the way you feel. If you can really tell the way I'm sitting right now, but I'm kind of a little closed-shouldered. Like if I stood up and got a little wider, that's a much more powerful stance than if I was a little more small and holding. And so just, you know, standing with a wider gait can command a certain kind of power. And you see men on this subway who take up 10 seats with their legs, you know, widely spread, and they're trying to send this power, maybe subliminally, this power message. So, you know, it's a really nice kind of breakdown of how charisma works in the book.
In terms of your, in terms of your experience, Arvind, what kind of, have you played with this at all, or have you, you know, seen if you can better engage people? I know we were talking about some. I can give you some examples too. I think it would be great to see a couple exampos.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So she issued a challenge in the podcast that said, when you walk into a coffee shop or any low stakes interaction, so someone you don't know and you're not going to really see again, and imagine that they're an angel with giant angel wings from heaven, and they have a message for you. You don't know what it is, but you can't say anything different than what you would normally say, like, I'll have a small cappuccino. But you have to say it, you know, with a feeling in your heart, knowing that they're an angel. So she said that feeling that you have within you will actually change very subtle body language and cues and your smile, and they'll respond differently. And so I've been testing it out, and it's hard to know whether or not it's the way I'm saying it or not. You know, would they respond any differently had I been rude? I don't know. Right. But I have been trying it whenever I've been in a coffee shop or a restaurant and trying to be really just looking at them, imagining them as the angel. And I gotta say it. I think it's either changing me or it's changing them or both, that it does feel different. And it feels wonderful.
Yeah, I think that some of that is like anytime I'm in an interaction, especially like I'm very conscious of people like about service, right? Knowing that we're serving, like I think I we the word I use, like I'll sometimes use is customer service, right? Where like schools are like, as much as it sounds really kind of um, like negative in some ways, but serving people is a really important thing for me, I guess, and in my interactions, and serving kids and serving the teachers around us. And so but in some ways, I always try to make sure that if I'm interacting with somebody in a service like industry, right? So like at a restaurant or whatever, that I make sure to spend that extra second to stop before I order and say like, how are you? And I think that that's kind of the beginning of it, but I haven't tried the angel trick.
Well,
I
what
might
she said was it doesn't matter what you say. And in fact, if you really want to test it, you should literally say the exact same words you would normally say.
right,
Like, I will have a coffee, but with that in your heart.
right,
So then you're really just seeing, is it the intentionality of how you say it and not what you say.
yeah.
So
So
she never really got into, it wasn't friendliness per se, but it was this presence. It's different than friendliness. Because you meet people who are charismatic who are not necessarily friendly.
right, yeah,
They're not,
no doubt
they're
about
not
it.
just nice. There's
Well,
something.
yeah, and that kind of the start of this is we were talking about like public speaking and people who really do that amazing job in public speaking formats, and you know I'm always so self-conscious in those moments, but I'm wondering what techniques she would recommend to be, what I mean, in those venues. So Arvind started talking about this book. I already bought it, so I'll have it in a couple days. Maybe we could do a check-in later on and talk some more about what we've learned as we've experimented with this a little bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to remember the name of this TED Talk I watch with my students before classes. It's this guy who talks about using your voice powerfully. So using like human interest, what he calls the human instrument, in a more powerful way. And one of the things he talks about in there is, if you're honest, right? If you're like a regularly sarcastic or a nasty person, it's Julian Treasure. That's his name. But people are much less likely to listen to you over time. And so I was telling my middle schoolers that if you're a person who gossips, you're less likely to be heard. And they were like really floored by that. So like when they're speaking in class, when they're trying to get people to listen to them, what they do outside of class beforehand and afterwards impacts that. Even impacts how the teacher hears them.
Yep.
So he had a little rubric for ways that like human society could be so much more advanced if we were actually able to speak better and people listen better. Those two things in concert.
Right. That's fantastic. I'm tweeting that out right now.
Yeah, I mean that's a wonderful, nice and short, and I use it at the beginning of classes just to get talking about how are we going to speak to each other in this class.
Right.
No, I can't do that at the beginning of every parent meeting or every faculty, but there is something lacking in the way we interact with each other sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a big difference, and in environments and kind of in school, being kind of compassionate and thoughtful listeners and engaging on a personal level is really important.
You were starting to say that you sometimes have parent meetings and the cell phones come into play. Do you want to comment on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, I think that even in vibrate mode, you still, in a quiet room, unless you, like, if I had, like, my window air conditioner on, you don't necessarily hear it, but there are so many moments where you're talking and you just hear that, right? And I'm guilty of it. I turn my phone on vibrate, and it's that split second, but it distracts you enough that you're not really present with people. Yeah. And I'm very self-conscious of that. That's frustrating for me, and I work really hard to be present in the room when I'm having a meeting, because it's really, really important that, we're talking either about a child or another, a teacher who's, having a challenge or whatever it is, but having the presence to be there for them is really important. So, and I just find that there are so many things that can distract us from that. It's important.
Our takeaway in that was, as soon as you lose presence, the other person knows instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly. And so right away they know. And it doesn't matter if it's not even your cell phone. If your just thoughts are starting to go to like, oh, I got to pick up, groceries on the way home, they know by your body language. And I was like, wow, that's, so it becomes that much more important to practice presence.
Right. Well, and I can imagine, and it's a stamina thing too, right? Like being present with somebody enough. I can remember the first couple of days of school this year, or like when we would have faculty meetings, and you would do like for the first time after the summer 5 hours during a day of like interacting with people.
Right.
5 or 6 hours of that is so much and so intense. So you really have to work on that stamina.
Well, we just had Vinny pop into the chat, but now we have to wrap the show. So I'm going to wrap the show, and then I can do a little post-show with Vinny. I know you have to run, Alex.
Awesome. Yeah, I have a meeting in a couple minutes. But thanks, everybody, for listening to 21st Century Learning. We really appreciate your time and your presence and attention to us for October 23rd, 2014. If you have questions or comments, you can find us on Twitter. And we look forward to talking to you in another couple weeks.
Have a good one.
Thanks.